As a supermodel, actress, and health expert, I've traveled the world, and I have learned that no two people share the same story. My name's Carol Alt, and in my living room, you'll hear the stories that have shaped some of the most successful people in their industries. Welcome to Carol Alt's Living Room. Fashion designers come from all walks of life, and no two designers are ever the same. But there's only one designer who went from designing paper dresses to custom gowns for the First Lady of the United States. Hear the story of the legendary Joanna Mastroianni, right here on Carol Alt's Living Room. One of the really great things about doing this show is I get to research friends that I have known for many, many years. We've known each other since literally the first year of my career, and that's going on almost 39 years now. Uh-oh, that makes us feel old, doesn't it? But I always thought that you were Italian. You're not. You're Greek. Tell me about that.
I was born in Greece. I lived there till I was 9 years old on this tiny island, and the family moved to New York. And I grew up out in Queens, Astoria, and that's where I literally started my career. I was making, out of scraps of fabric, garments for Barbie doll. So every Saturday, I would showcase them on the steps of our home, and my girlfriends would come over with their Barbie dolls, and I kept it very simple. A cocktail dress was 25 cents and a gown was 50 cents. So this was going back to the very early days, and I was probably one of these kids that had total clarity. I knew exactly what I was going to be doing.
Well, how did you get off the island in the first place? What decision was made in the family to make you move from a beautiful Greek island to the middle of Astoria, Queens, which at that time was basically Greek town?
Well, it was basically Greek and Italian town, and really the decision was made by my parents, specifically by my dad, who was really very creative and quite a visionary. And he had come to the United States, and he was out in LA working for 20th Century Fox.
Doing what?
He was building sets for them.
He was a carpenter.
Yeah.
And a set designer.
Yeah, so this is what he did, and he really felt that his kids would not have the best future on this tiny little island. So he felt it was the right time to take us out of there. And really, we were not supposed to hang out in Astoria. New York was sort of, the first stop. We were going to learn the English language and then move out to LA. But we said, we're not doing that, we're staying here, and that's what happened.
Well, New York is like no other city in the world, so everybody feels that when they get here. And either it's in their blood or it's not. I mean, some people are mowed under by New York, but you thrived here. You started your first business when you were 9, did you say? That was Barbie doll clothes?
Yeah, I loved being in New York. It was very, very exciting for me because it was this amazing city. I'm a very visual person, so there was so much to see, there was so much to do, and I became an absolute addict from a point of view that every weekend, and thank God my parents did not have the fear, I'd get on the train from Astoria and come into the city.
How old were you?
I was probably about 10 years old at the time.
Yeah, it was a different time when
it was
you
different
could be
times.
10 and run around in the city.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, you didn't speak any English.
No.
How quickly did you learn English? Because literally you have no accent.
I pretty much picked it up really quickly. I wanted very much to fit in. I wanted to be an American. It was important to me as a little kid to fit in with this exciting new culture that I was introduced to. So I got on the train with a friend of mine every single weekend, and we would get off on Fifth Avenue, look at the windows at Bergdorf's, because we were both wanting to be fashion girls. We made a decision we were going to have.
You do this at 10, wow.
Yeah, and then from there we would go on to the Metropolitan Museum and sit there with a sketch pad for hours every single weekend, literally 50 weekends out of the year, and probably did this for about 5-6 years. So that was my routine, that was my therapy.
So you basically already had your portfolio of sketches before you were 11 years old.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was sketching, before I came to New York, and for me, sketching is very therapeutic. I enjoy sketching, I love sketching, And I also, in addition to sketching, as a designer, I love draping. So very often you're going to find me in my designing room working with fabric. So that
How many people can drape? It really is a specific. I know that Nicole Miller went to Paris to learn to drape. It just seemed to be something that was innate to you.
It's something, yeah, it came very easily and very naturally to me. It's almost like sculpting. So instead of working with clay, I work with the different fabrics. What's wonderful about it is every single fabric has its own language. So you learn to listen, to be a good listener. And I could spend hours sitting there and draping. And in the early days, I mean, when I was doing this, we didn't have an iPhone. So I would drape an idea and I take a picture of it, send it out to be developed, and before I take it
2
apart.
weeks it comes back.
Right, and keep on, but I enjoy it immensely.
I was just going to say, it's a very timely topic because there's so much talk in the news these days about immigrants and immigrant rights. Your father said something very important. Immigrants need to work twice as hard as everybody else. Did you feel that growing up?
Oh, absolutely. I had the most marvelous parents who felt it was a blessing to be in America. And they said, you have to work and work and work. And both of my parents had 2 and 3 jobs. This is how they were able to raise 3 kids in America. And that was made very clear to us early on. And also, the other thing that was made very clear was, what do you love doing? Find something that you love doing and stay with it. It's not going to feel like work, ever.
Well, your father said, you shouldn't be afraid of work. How did he end it?
And work harder.
Work should be afraid of you.
Exactly. Exactly.
And you've taken that to heart because you really, literally do what you're very, very passionate about. How did you jump from making Barbie clothes and clothes? Tell us about the dress made of paper.
Well, the dress made of paper was actually the first dress that I made for myself. And the way that came about was we arrived in America, in New York, via boat. So we were on a boat for 13 days. This was our journey, arriving here. And one of the things that we had to do was perform for the adults. And I wasn't prepared for this, so I decided, well, what am I going to do? So I went into the arts and crafts room, and they had all these different types of paper there, and I took the paper and I whipped up a little dress, and then I came out and
It's like
sang
the
my
original
song.
origami, except you were wearing it.
Exactly. So that's how the paper dress came about, because it was like, you have to react to the moment always, and that, I mean, it was another. We always have lessons in our lives. That was an early lesson about wardrobe. What am I going to do? What am I going to wear? I wasn't prepared for, a performance coming from this little tiny island. So.
Well, I later on in the conversation, I want to get into how that led into your first job, your first major job. But I wanted to know who was the inspiration for you to become a seamstress, a designer.
My first inspiration was one of my godmothers. Okay, now usually one has a godmother. I have 6 of them. So
how do you have 6 godmothers?
Well, they were
worried in case 1 or 2 would kick off. You would have 3 or 4 left.
Well,
to
it was
choose
interesting. Both of my parents were very loved, and they had so many wonderful friends. And each one wanted to be my godmother, and they didn't know how to say no. So they said yes to all 6 of them, and I was really lucky. One of them was amazing. This was my inspiration. She was more than a godmother to me. She was a seamstress. So I used to leave our house. I was like a 4-year-old, and you're on a little island. Everybody knows one another. It's very safe.
It's very safe.
So I would go to her house.
Toddle out of your house.
Okay.
Into hers.
Into her house. She would, whatever scraps of fabric were there, they were mine. She had the biggest scissors, and she trusted me to work with it. And I would bring my doll there, and I would sit there for hours, playing on the doll. I had no idea that what I was doing was draping. I had no idea that what I was doing as a 4-year-old was pattern making. But that's what I did, and she was clearly my greatest, earliest inspiration.
Did you? So, since these things came so naturally to you, Did you go to school to hone it better? Where did you go to school?
So I went to FIT, and I have also gone to Parsons. So that it was important to do that. And speaking of FIT, as a matter of fact, as I was getting ready to graduate from FIT, in those days you had the marvelous Bendel's that was open every Friday to new designers, and I went to them with some of the projects, some of the garments I had created in my senior year at FIT, and they said, great, we're giving you an order. Except in those days, I was clueless about production, about anything.
Right, the business end of
exactly.
designing.
So actually, one of my earliest professional orders came in from Bendel's while I was still in school.
But you didn't like back to school clothes. You actually spent your back to school money on something else. What was it?
Oh yeah. It was, well, I was never a practical child.
Okay.
Okay, so
You're qualifying your answer.
Yeah, so both of my parents were clear about that, and my mother decided instead of taking me shopping, she would give me my budget for the school year, for me to go and pick out my own clothes. Well, you know, the neighborhood that I was in did not necessarily, the stores in the neighborhood in those days did not appeal to me in a story. I related much more to Bergdorf's, and I related much more to walking into Bloomingdale's even as a 10-year-old or as a 12-year-old. So I took the whole budget that they allowed for the whole year, and I showed up with a little vest. And one piece, and my mother says, and where's the rest? I said, this is it. And she says, but it can't be.
Quality
I said, yes, it
quality,
is.
yeah.
And, you know, and thank God my mother was not aware that there's a return policy. So I had that one piece, and I made it work, and I mixed and matched it with other things, and that clearly influenced my career even later on, because I love doing separates.
So you're in school, you're at FIT, at Parsons, you get this order from Bergdorf. Now, I've found that some designers can do everything on their own. Mm-hmm. They can do the numbers, they can do the ordering, they can do the pattern cutting, and others can do only the creative. And they have a partner who does the business side. How are you set up?
Well, I do not have a partner that does the creative side. And
No, the business side, I think you would be the creative side.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I do not have a partner that does the business side. I basically not only do the creative side, but I've had to learn, and it's called survival. For me to stay in business, and it's going to be 30 years this year, okay, that I'm in business, that I've set up, I had to be very clear as to not only my fantasies and my creations, but who's going to wear that? Who am I aiming for? Because all this creativity is marvelous, but if you don't have backers, and if you can't do numbers, and you need to keep your door open.
Right, because you got this order from Bergdorf, you're in your senior year, you're sketching away, which you've been doing since you're 10, you're able to drape, you're able to create these fabulous clothes, but you have to make a business around this ability that you have.
Well, yeah, you know, and what was interesting is my first order came from Henry Bendel's when I was a student.
I'm
at
sorry,
FIT.
I thought it was
Henry.
Bergdorf.
It was Henry Bendel's, and those were the days when you had Jerry Studs there. That was this fabulous visionary. What then happened was I decided to go into business, and that was like one of those freaky accidents. It was not initially planned. I mean, after I did my own thing and I realized, my God, I wasn't billing enough for those dresses. I clearly was clueless.
You lost money.
I lost money, but I just, you know, I needed to honor the order, and I was humbled that.
What was the order?
It was basically like 3 different style jackets and 4 different little cocktail dresses.
And how many of each?
Probably some of the styles were like 2 units or 3 units of each, but basically you're talking about having to grade the you know, you had to do the patterns, you had to learn overnight how to make the appropriate sizes, you then had to learn how to cut, and then you had to learn how to sew them. I mean, I knew all this, but not
putting it into
production. It was
practice,
about a single garment that you could spend 3-4 weeks on developing a single garment. This was, you know, producing let's say 25 garments, and you had 6 weeks to deliver them. So it was a whole different time schedule. I, after that, designed other things. I designed items, I designed blouses, I designed separates, I did sportswear. And how I ended up going into business for myself was I ended up being in an accident. Okay, I was having dinner with a friend on the west side, and it was raining, and these 3 cars crashed into one another. One of them came flying into the restaurant. It hit me. I had a concussion.
Oh my God.
And I was really out of commission. So once I started to come around, I realized you're not always going to have the time to plan on what you want to do and when you want to do it. It was really important to act on now. The now became so much in focus. So basically, out of this car accident, I ended up getting $46,000, and I used that money, and that's what started the business. And I want you to know.
So a silver lining in every cloud.
Oh, absolutely, always. So it was those $46,000 and a small gift for my parents.
And back then, $46,000 was a lot of money.
It was,
30 years ago?
But also, this kind of work takes up a lot of money. By the time you buy the fabrics, by the time you go into the patterns, money gets eaten up really quickly. So I really went into business because I realized I had to pursue my dream. I can no longer put it off. I had to act on that right now. So I then formed a corporation. So it was no longer, working off my kitchen floor, and found a little space over on 40th Street.
I just want to give a little perspective here. I bought my first apartment in New York City about 30 years ago for $50,000, a 2-bedroom on Sutton Place. So I just want to give perspective to the people who are viewing, what $50,000 or $46,000 could buy back then.
Yeah.
So you're now doing your business, and you've taken this money and you've incorporated. Take it from there.
So I'm in business, and my very first order now comes in from Bergdorf Goodman.
Okay. All right, so I wasn't far off.
No, you were very close. Well, they're across the street. They're across the street. So, so Bergdorf's was my first client at the same time as Martha's was on Park Avenue.
What was Martha's?
Oh, it was a fabulous specialty store, Martha's and Martha Phillips. What they did is, she was such another fabulous merchant who brought to this country, whether it was Valentino, Christian Lacroix, she had the best of the best. And she really nurtured, young talent. So, but what's also interesting is I start to work with Bergdorf's. My very first windows were my first season in business. June of 1988.
Okay.
Okay. And it turns out to be on exactly the same day, which was June 21st. I arrived in this country on June 21st, 1967. Okay. 21 years later, I had my first windows at Bergdorf. So for me, it was also a wonderful dream come true, because here I was, as a kid, I would take the train from Astoria, walk out of the train, spend 10 minutes walking around, looking at Bergdorf. Yeah. And it was.
And of course, the windows at Bergdorf are like the windows.
So
for fashion, they're the windows still.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they've gotten better.
Yes.
Linda does an amazing job.
Amazing job.
Yeah. So that was sort of like my early beginnings. So I set up the corporation, and I remembered, every second in the back of my mind was what my father said to me. The work has to be afraid of you. Don't ever be afraid. So you make a commitment. I made this unconditional commitment where I worked around the clock, whatever needed to be done, I was willing to do it.
Were you working alone?
I had a small team because,
what
I
did
didn't
your
have
team
the fun.
include?
Well, it included 2 seamstresses and a cutter and myself, and then we
Did
would
you have
bring.
A pattern maker? You did
I
the
did the
patterns
patterns.
yourself?
I did the patterns myself. My initial space was so small that when we did model fittings, we would do them in the hallway. Because you couldn't fit everybody in. And then I would hang the garments off the pipes. And I said, oh my God, I hope those water pipes never
Don't break one day.
So those
You're talking about the sprinkler pipes.
Yeah. So those were, the early days. So and there was lots of marvelous stories and memories from those. And, I think what's important, and what's important also for young designers to hear, is to really be passionate about what you do. You really have to love this.
Yeah, because then it's not a job, right?
It's not a job,
just
but
doing something you love.
But it's also, you end up putting so much time that it becomes a tremendous part of your life. And you have to learn how to write it out. So this is where you have to switch over, not just from thinking, creative, but how you're going to survive and how you're going to navigate the conditions that are also presented to you.
And there's so many designers today to actually float above that, to be noticed and recognized and find distribution and things like that. You really have to stand out. And I have to say, I mean, we're both wearing your fashions today. I have to say, you're quite a standout.
Thank you.
You, at one point, designed for theater.
Yep. So I've done, different items were done for the theater, but also quite a few of my pieces were pulled out from the collection for the theater and also for the movies. One of actually,
Well, tell us some of the places we could have seen them.
the
plays?
My first little black dress that I did, which was a combination of the sexy matte jersey with organza with illusion, which was, quite new at the time. We're going back now almost 30 years.
I remember.
So that particular dress was renamed Tequila Sunrise because Michelle Pfeiffer had it on in Tequila Sunrise. The same dress went on to be used in Bonfire of the Vanities with Melanie Griffith. So it was interesting to see the life that, the garments take.
Absolutely.
The same way that I've done these sexy red gowns. As a matter of fact, you've worn this gown.
To the FIFA.
Yeah. And then that particular gown has gone on to be on the cover of different magazines. I've had different editorials with it. And that also, tells you a little bit about my philosophy in designing.
I just want to give a little perspective again. So when you were making this dress, this little black organza dress with the illusion, I remember I had made a dress for a movie that I was in. I designed it myself that had these huge cutouts, and the whole back was just basically, it was like stocking, basically. And I remember that it was so rare to have these kinds of dresses that the newspaper basically made fun of me. Carol Alt's dress has more curves than a country road. Where is Carol Alt's dress? So when you were doing this, I think you did that even before I did mine, this was so unique that people were stunned when they saw it. It wasn't like today where people wear all kinds of crazy stuff and it's hard to step out from the shadows because everybody's wearing half dresses and pasties basically. In our time when this was happening, this was an incredibly risky dress.
Absolutely, but it's very true to who we are as creative people. My technical background has been such an asset for me because you then know how to balance fabrics together. How do you bring them together so that they're going to work together when they normally are? You're not supposed to combine those fabrics, and that's part of us as creative people, always thinking outside of the box, always experimenting.
Never taking no for an answer.
Oh no. And it's funny that you say that. The first time that I was able to get an appointment with Bergdorf's was on a Saturday. And the buyer said, I don't have much time, but I can give you 10 minutes. You need to come up within an hour. I packed 60 garments on these black velvet hangers, threw them in these garment bags that looked like I was dragging bodies, went to see the buyer at Bergdorf's in those days. That was my very first meeting. She looked at it and said, it's interesting, but it's not for us. Thank you. So
what were you showing her?
I was showing her some of the early pieces that I had done, and the buyer at the time did not feel it was right.
But so I find your dresses very elegant and certainly of the ilk of a Bergdorf Goodman buyer. So I was wondering what your earlier pieces were that she thought that maybe these
Well, it was a
didn't fit.
different buyer, and sometimes, different point of views relate to different buyers better. But it was interesting because speaking of the word no, she said no to me, and it was much easier going to Bergdorf's with 60 garments
Than
and the
coming back with them,
than coming
after a
back.
no.
But
Joanna.
I went back to the drawing board,
Right.
and I said, how do I make this better? How do I take a no and really take it and run with it. So, you know, we've learned along the way that no is just really the beginning.
There's still a possibility that there's a door there.
Yeah, always.
But, so you went back to the drawing board in this particular instance, and what, you created a whole new
Collection.
collection?
And the next collection, I contacted Bergdorf's, and as it turned out, also this buyer was no longer there. I had a new buyer. So the new
She
person,
liked the original one.
right,
I'm
right.
just
So the new buyer was very excited. As a matter of fact, not only did they give me an order, what they did was they gave me windows at the same time that LVMH was launching Christian Lacroix. So Christian Lacroix was on
in
Fifth
one window,
Avenue,
right?
okay, and I had the 58th Street windows. You know, LVMH had invested mega millions into that company. I had started out with the $46,000, and we ended up in the
Merging
same
in the
place,
same
which
place.
was really exciting.
Your first collections were a mixture of ready-to-wear and couture. You did
Yeah.
Pants and shirts, but the Joanna Mastroianni I know, when I go up to your studio or I see your shows, are mostly haute couture.
Yeah.
It's very rare to find a designer, maybe Ralph Rucci, for example, doing haute couture.
Yeah.
So how did you go from this designer ready-to-wear to the other end of the spectrum of these haute couture pieces like this? What made you do that?
Basically, again, the love and passion. I have a tremendous understanding for the tiniest details, tremendous.
But you could do that with a ready-to-wear line. It doesn't have to be a haute couture line.
Well, the difference between the two is the amount of work, the detailing. It starts with the materials, okay? It starts with the techniques. But before even all that, you have to love it. It becomes a true obsession, because when you really do the haute and the couture garments, what happens is it's about every single detail, every single inch of the garment matters. So, and I like doing that because it gives me the greatest creative freedom. So I take that, and what I've actually done over the years is take some of these techniques that I have developed, and I have also brought them to the ready-to-wear, so that you know, it becomes much more feasible for one to collect.
Well, you've actually been caught saying that haute couture is kind of dead. So
Well,
that's because you think that it should come off the rack, basically, not designing a dress for a particular person. How did that come about?
No. I don't think it's dead. I think it's a craft. So I've created this dress that you're wearing. It's hand beaded. I've designed every single detail on it. The difference is we have figured out how to engineer it so that it becomes then affordable. One can then walk into, whether it's Bergdorf's or, you know, Saks, and you can buy the dress. It's no longer, you know,
So
the
you're
made to
not
order.
hand making every piece. You hand make the first one, and then you found a way to mechanize the rest of the
No,
line?
we're
I don't
hand
understand.
making
You're
everything.
hand making
We
everything.
are hand making
So
everything.
it's not, but you're making many pieces.
We are. The difference is we really are taking all those marvelous techniques and we're making them, we're creating multiple garments so that you can reach a greater audience. But it's still a limited audience. I mean, who am I
Who
selling
can
to?
afford a dress
It's
like this?
It's the 1% or the 5% population of
Who
the world.
can utilize a dress
Right,
like this as
right,
well.
Right.
Have you ever wanted to do a lower end
Yes.
line?
Yeah, I would love to do that. It's something I've been thinking about to sort of
Right, so
bring
you can
the
spread
ideas.
Joanna
Yeah,
Mastroianni
exactly,
around.
exactly. So that would be the next step for me. I've been seriously thinking about it.
I'm going to ask you a question I haven't asked any of the other designers because we're friends, so I feel like I can ask this. You know, when I'm at your runway shows, I see bloggers in the front rows. I see people with phones filming your show, filming your one-of-a-kind pieces, and then sending this out across the Ethernet. And the next thing you know, people are stealing your designs, and because what most people probably don't know is that you're showing fall in the spring and spring in the fall. So now, if it's a fashion week in September and we're going into fall, you're actually showing next spring. So your designs don't actually come out in the stores until next spring. So somebody who's sitting in the front row at your show can steal a design, one-off it quickly, cheaper, not as well done, of course, and then basically usurp an idea that you have. Do you think ever we're going to come to a point in the fashion industry where we're doing fall and fall and spring just to protect the integrity of your property?
Well, I think we're working closer to the season, but what I would like to see is more protection for the designers. We don't have any copyrights to our work.
Nothing. That's
so
what I'm saying. They can steal it and no repercussions
of course.
whatsoever.
You could be sitting in one of my shows and you're doing a video and you post it, and 5 seconds later, China is already copying it before I get back to my design room.
In fact, I have to tell you, I was at a show last night and I took a video of the finale, both coming and going, and I was about to post it and I went, I can't do that to the designer because I understand that people steal intellectual property, this is an intellectual property. This is something you created, you own it, you've done it, and then somebody comes and they steal it at the last minute.
It's an ongoing problem that we have as designers, and I really hope that someday that some laws are created to protect us, because it's the only industry we're not protecting.
Catch up, and it has to catch up because this is changing so quickly. I never thought about that 5 years ago. But you look across the aisle and there's all these young bloggers there and they're with their phones. Nobody's even looking at the runway anymore.
Yeah, it's sad.
They're living through the experience through their phones, and then the next thing you know, your design, this dress, is somewhere in somebody's website going, oh, we love this, let's knock this off.
Yeah.
And then your work for the past year, half a year, is somebody else's property now because they can get it out faster. What do you think needs to be done?
Well, I think laws have to be created to protect us.
By who? The CFDA? Like, who's going to police that?
Well, I think the CFDA needs to look into it, but I think it's got to go beyond, the CFDA. The powers being need to address it. How is it that, Microsoft can sue Apple for, the smallest little detail, and we have no protection in our world?
None at all, absolutely. You're what we would call a lone designer, right? You work by yourself in your own design house with your own design team. Why have you never gone after a financial partner?
It's like anything else. It has to be the right one. So,
are you actively looking?
I have not been actively looking, but I'm thinking about it if I'm going to really expand the business. Honestly, Carol, I've been mostly focused on the product. I'm like one of these designers that is in the design room all the time.
That's the creative.
Yeah.
So
So I have
maybe
not.
it's time for a business partner
probably,
to help.
Probably to help take it to a whole other level, because I can certainly
design. You can only get to a certain level, right? You can only get to a certain, because one person can only do 2 jobs so far and so much without exhaustion.
Oh, I do like 20 jobs in there.
Yeah.
It's amazing because I design every single detail for every single garment, whether it's the clothing, whether it's the accessories, whatever it is. And as much as I love doing all that, it takes me away from other things.
Right. So what has stopped you from pursuing that? Just not the right partner showing themselves, or not the right opportunity?
I have not had the right opportunity yet. So for me, if it doesn't feel right, because I trust my instincts, I'd rather not do it until it's the right thing, until it's the right situation presents itself.
You've had some ups and downs in your career.
Oh, sure.
I remember speaking with you. I was in an airport, and I don't know, I had this vibe that I needed to speak with you, and I called you, and it was right at the housing bubble, when the housing bubble burst, and all those underwritten house mortgages fell apart,
The shift of the economy,
there was a huge shift in the economy.
Yeah.
I know you were deeply hurt by that in terms of your business. Tell me about that time, because people are thinking only about the housing, and they're thinking about people's banks accounts or their retirement funds. But I started thinking, because I was talking with you, about my friends in the fashion industry, because you've got designs out into stores that now nobody can afford to buy. So take us through that time for you.
Well, basically, one of the things that happens also is you ship stores, you ship them on terms. when stores run into problems and they then are forced to go into Chapter 7 or Chapter 11.
Yeah, but we're talking about you're dealing with Saks and Bergdorf's and all
Well,
these
we're not talking about them. They're fine and they're solid. We're talking about
Some of the
years
smaller
ago.
people.
Some of the smaller ones, and some you had department stores that went out. And these were people you were working with. These were people that owed you money.
Relationships with.
And then you're stuck. You're not, you've already laid out the money to create the product for them. You have shipped it. Now they're going bankrupt, and you're not going to get your money back, and you have to figure how to survive. And this is, very much to our conversation earlier. You have to learn how to navigate, even as a creative person.
You have to
How
tap
are you gonna
dance very
survive?
quick.
Yeah, you have to quickly move and say, oh my God, this money that I was expecting to come in and pay the rent is not going to happen. So what do I do next?
Where do I
Exactly.
go? How do I raise the money?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just be a designer. You have to be creative in other ways too. You, even though you're a lone designer, you love collaborations.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting next to Iris
Sure.
one day. You created an entire line around
Yeah.
a personality. How else do you collaborate with people, and how do you choose the people that you collaborate with?
Well, when I design a collection, there's always a starting point. That is my inspiration, okay? And I've done many collections over the years with different themes. I mean, I've done one, on a dragonfly, because you came into my studio one day in July, and I'm like, okay,
They're
you're
beautiful
it.
though, right?
They're
Yeah.
beautiful. You're colorful.
They're
I love the
colorful,
message.
they're graceful.
Right. You're the inspiration for the next collection. I've done, a collection that was inspired by a Byzantine cross. I've done a collection that was inspired by the amazing Lillian Bassman, who was the most marvelous photographer. She was really one of the early pioneers of fashion photography. I did a collection that was inspired by Iris. So basically, I had met Iris years ago. I had seen the exhibit that was at the Metropolitan Museum.
And by the way, we did do a show on Iris, which you came and you helped out with.
And
You brought me one of the Iris-inspired dresses.
Yeah, and we became friends over the years. And
No, but you did something very unique. I've never seen a designer walk down a runway and pick up somebody from the audience to walk.
Thank you. Well, Iris was the inspiration for that collection, and basically for me, it was about taking the way that I saw Iris was as this fabulous fashion icon that she is, going on a journey throughout the world. So she started out in New York, was going through Paris, was going into Asia, and and Iris came up to the studio when I contacted her and said, look, you're my inspiration. I'd love for you to see what I'm doing. And she was very excited. She came up, she hung out in the studio for a few hours.
Did she give you pointers and tell you how to change things?
Definitely.
Because she's that
Iris
personality.
has a fabulous and a definite opinion about everything. So after when we were ready, and it was really quite spontaneous. It was not rehearsed, okay, and Iris was at the show. And I think as a matter of fact,
She was like 92 or something.
Yeah, at the time she was, yeah. And you were sitting next to Iris, okay.
I was shocked. I was really shocked.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to, I was like, what is she doing? I mean,
Right.
This grand gesture.
Well,
I've never seen a designer be so selfless.
Well, thank you. It was, I very much appreciate people in my life, people that inspire me, friends. And Iris was my inspiration, and I really wanted to share her with my audience and basically to the world, and that was the idea. That's when I went, and I mean, you were right next to her. I was pulling her. She didn't even want to come up.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, come on, Iris, I want everybody to know you, because at the time, that was really the beginning of this, mega starlet that our girl has become.
Yes, she has
Yeah.
soared. You've had some incredible happenstances at your
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We've had a lot of unexpected
disasters
surprises.
and surprises. I was across from Carmen Del Orifice when she was at your show.
Oh my God.
Do you remember this?
With the Madoff. Oh God.
Madoff. They came in and they subpoenaed her
Right before the show.
Right before the show. She was sitting directly across.
And she came anyway. And she came to the show.
She was there at the show when somebody approached her about it and handed her papers like this. I was sitting across from her.
She
I know that they probably
me.
did it several times, but she came to the show.
But she's such a pro.
She's unbelievable.
You know,
but so Madoff made its way into your shows. We had somebody die.
Well, that was at the Irish show.
That
was the Irish show. So it was look, here I was doing a collection that was inspired and
I know, and you're
honoring
trying to focus
Iris,
on getting
and then
these.
Zelda went. But I have to tell you,
we had the paramedics come in. They took her out.
It was a lot of drama.
It was drama.
But you know.
But I have to say, you have dramatic clothes, so it all kind of added to the allure of your show.
But what's also interesting is in knowing Zelda. Okay, Zelda at the time was 94 years old. Okay,
she would have wanted to go out that way.
Her greatest fear was dying alone, because she really was alone. But she was marvelous. Every night, when she could, she would be out every night, and she was very, very passionate about life. And she was also very supportive of my work. And she said to me, "I don't understand why everybody doesn't know about you."
It was my next question, in fact.
Okay,
because you're so incredible. You do such amazing, creative work. It's always been a surprise to me when I walk a carpet and I'm like, I'm wearing Joanna Mastroianni, and they go, "Can you spell that?" I'm like, you should know this name.
Thank you.
You should, and that's why I guess I asked that question about you getting help with maybe a business partner. So to spread this, to spread the Joanna Mastroianni name, so that everybody has a Mastroianni in their closet, not just
Thank you. I'm ready.
Yes, absolutely. What was your least favorite show? Was there a collection that was your absolute, you just said, I don't know how I did that, oh my God, it's
my least favorite?
Yeah. Do you have one?
I'm very critical of my work. So when I look at my shows, when I look at my work, I look at something and say, I could have done this better. I should have changed this. Or I should have done this.
So it's about better. It's not about the inspiration that created the show.
Well, no, the show is already created. And, I think it's also a learning process. When I look at my early shows, I look at them differently. Mm-hmm. Okay. When I go back, and I plan to go back in doing another runway show, I will be approaching it differently. We learn, we grow, we evolve.
Please, I've worn some outfits, I look at them and I go, how did I leave the house like that? Never one of yours, but I've had a couple of those. And, certainly the papers always let you know. Tell me, which one was your favorite collection? Do you have a favorite?
I have a few of them. One of my favorite collections was when I did the Lillian Bassman collection that was inspired by Lillian's work.
What did you like about the collection?
It was very graphic, it was black and white, and it was really very much Lillian. Lillian was this marvelous petite little lady who was like 5 feet tall, but she thought she was Carol. She thought she was 6 feet tall, and she carried herself. And she was all about beauty. She was all about celebrating women. So that was, one of my favorite shows, because it was also very personal to me. It was really thanking Lillian for being somebody that was so important in my life, and what was also marvelous was at the day of the runway show, Mayor Bloomberg proclaimed that day, February 17th, Lillian Bassman Day in New York. So every single February we have that.
Well, but you have two of those because you did that for Iris.
Yeah,
as
and
well.
I did that for Iris
you
also. So
that.
yeah, so Lillian was definitely one of my favorite runway shows. So was my Iris show. I had fun developing that collection.
I for some reason thought the Byzantine cross, because I think that just so reminds me of you in the way that you create.
Well, thank you. And it was really very much ahead of the curve at that time.
Yes.
When I did these crazy, fabulous shapes and working with metal and doing these capes and then doing illusion and doing sheer garments where, I had a runway show where there was a quote, where they said it was walking nipples because everything was totally so sheer, and that's
God,
okay.
No, it's everybody.
But it's okay. I celebrate the body. I don't have a problem with showcasing.
In fact, you love the female form, and you love to do dresses that show off the female form in a sexy, kind of classy way. In fact, so sexy, so classy, that I saw a picture of you with the First Lady. And Did you design her dress for her?
Well, I've designed, different dresses. This one was actually pulled from the collection. And the thing about it is, I love designing I just design, period. Okay, so
And if it
so there's
speaks to somebody,
if it speaks to somebody, I welcome it. If it's a personality, it's marvelous because basically the personalities will bring more attention to my work.
Right.
But I also love working with interesting women that allow me to create and allow me to sort of just give me carte blanche and say, okay, just go do your thing.
So you didn't do that for the First Lady? She didn't say, I'm giving you carte blanche?
No. She picked something
Yeah,
that I had created and says, I love it. I said, sure, go for it.
How fabulous was
Yeah,
that? Were you all excited?
I was excited. I was
would
also
think
very
so.
excited when I had worked, when I had dressed 3 out of the 4 main characters in Sex and the City too. That was really exciting for
In the
me.
movie?
Yeah. I had Sarah Jessica Parker in the scene that she's walking
How
into
did you not
Bergdorf's.
mention that earlier in this interview?
Okay, yeah. So that was really an exciting moment for me because actually I had worked with the stylist and I did not know anything. I just
Was it
knew
still Patricia at the time?
Patricia
Fields?
was Patricia and Danny Santiago were collaborating on this. So Danny had come in to meet with me and says, I love this, pulls all these pieces. I know nothing, okay? I don't know what's going to be used, and I was sort of
You had to be free and
I
easy
had to be
about
free
it.
and easy
Yeah.
about it. It was like, okay, that's cool. And then all of a sudden, there's the opening scene, and there's Sarah Jessica Parker walking into Bergdorf's to meet her girlfriends in my dress, and I'm like, oh my God! And then
And now I have to view the movie again.
well, and they didn't tell me because Danny
Right.
said, I want you to be
Opening scene,
surprised,
yeah.
And then the scene where they're in Abu Dhabi walking by the pool, so this she had on my dress, and then another critical moment with the gold gown was in there. So I was really it was again, but it's
now I have to go and review that movie
yeah.
just to
So
see your
I had
outfits.
3
now that
out
I
of the
know.
4
yeah.
main characters in that. So that was kind of exciting.
Very exciting.
I mean, I just did some pieces for.
Do you? I hate to cut you off, but a thought just came into my head. Maybe what your issue isn't so much you need a partner in terms of business, but maybe you need to kick butt in PR.
Yeah, I need a really good publicist. Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't know this. Like these great dresses
because I don't
in
have
this
a publicist.
fabulous #1 movie, and nobody knew.
Well, I've always been about the work. I've never
Yeah,
really
but
focused on the
You're
PR
not gonna have the
end
work
of
if
it.
nobody knows
Yeah.
you're there.
You know.
You gotta do more things like this.
Thank you.
Yes.
You
Thank you
know,
for coming. I so appreciate having you
Oh,
here.
absolutely. Thank you for being such a wonderful friend and being such a beautiful person inside and out.
Do you remember the first time we met?
Tommy Awards, sitting at the same table, Model of the Year, and I was nominated for Designer of the Year.
Were you designing for theater at that point?
No, I was designing for a polyester company, if you can believe it, $12 a blouse. That's what they were wholesaling for. And they let me break loose and create something outside of what they were selling, and I got the nomination.
Do you remember what the award looked like?
Very strange looking, branches, something
Do you
bizarre.
still have yours? I have mine.
Oh my God, good for you, yes.
I call it
How cool.
my dental instruments. Doesn't it look like dental
Very
instrument?
much so, very much so.
I can't believe after all these years and all the moving I've done, I still have that award for Model of the Year. But yeah, we met over this award.
That's right, at the same table. That was the beginning of our friendship.
Absolutely.
And you
Well, I
look
hope that we have
fabulous.
and you really, and I
Thank
hope
you.
that we have many, many more years of friendship.
Absolutely.
Thank you again for coming on the show. I really appreciate having you here. And thank you guys for joining us on Carol's Living Room. We hope to see you again next time.